Let us bow our heads and pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with grateful hearts for the gift of learning. Bless this time we share, guide our minds to understand, our hearts to listen, and our hands to serve with wisdom and compassion. We ask this through Christ our Lord, amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Okay, we have a lot to tackle today, no? So it's first part is the infectious, and then atong lecture, no, katong gastro, which we missed last week. I'm really sorry, Rashid. I was not informed. I tried to contact Doc Payad last week niya, di man siya nakatulog, so I was in an emergency, so I couldn't. I was told that a lot of you were waiting, so I'm really sorry for that, huh? Okay.
Yes, tako kira
So,
Dubai.
so series of exams mo, how was your week so far?
Kaya pa
Okay ra?
daw.
Kaya na exam?
Kaya pa daw.
Okay. Sige, sige. Let's start na. Pa mo exam later, no? I think, no?
Tomorrow, Doc.
Tomorrow pa. Sige,
And
sige.
yung route.
Okay. I hope to tackle everything, no? This is just basically mga 6 diseases all in all. So, siguro by 12 we'll be done, no? I hope earlier. Okay. So, let's start. So our objectives is to discuss the pathophysio, diagnostics, and management of the following diseases. Please let me know if you can't hear me, ha? Okay, I tend to mumble and then mo lower akong voice, so please feel free to interrupt me anytime. Okay, so for the infectious diseases, I was tasked to discuss on dengue fever, rabies, and tetanus. So let's start off with a case. A 20-year-old woman presents with high-grade fever for 4 days with severe myalgia or break bone fever, retroorbital pain, and rash. And on the 5th day, she developed abdominal pain, vomiting, and petechiae. Her vital signs were slightly low but normal. BP with 90/60 with a tachycardic at 110 and hematocrit, which showed hemoconcentration at 50% and thrombocytopenia with a platelet count of 60,000. No, our salient feature showed patient with febrile illness with rash, myalgia, and a positive tourniquet test. And probably in the critical phase, no, wherein there is plasma leakage, rising hematocrit, and falling platelets and hypotension. Occurrence is usually in the defervescence phase, usually on day 4 to 7. So, what do you think this is? Klaro naman, no? So, break bone fever, petechiae, hemoconcentration, thrombocytopenia. So most likely dengue, no? Okay. So dengue fever, this is probably the most important arthropod-borne viral diseases worldwide, and is very common in the Philippines, with approximately 390 million infections occurring per year, of which 96 million causes signs of disease. Now, of course, you all know this already. The vector is Aedes aegypti, or the Aedes albopictus, no? Which are mosquitoes which typically breed near the human habitation, using relatively fresh water from sources such as mga stagnant water jars, mga vases, discarded containers, no? And these mosquitoes usually inhabit the dwellings, and they usually bite during the day. Okay. Dengue begins after an incubation period of averaging 4 to 7 days. Okay. When the typical patient experiences sudden onset of fever, frontal headache, retroorbital pain, and back pain, no, typical kind of viral infection, no, along with severe myalgias. Now, these symptoms give rise to what you call the breakbone fever. No, it has a wide clinical spectrum that includes both severe and non-severe clinical manifestations. Now, after the incubation period, the illness begins uh, abruptly, and then patients with moderate to severe disease is followed by 3 phases. No, as stated here, the febrile, the critical, and the recovery phases. So first, we have the febrile phase. No. So as shown here, we have, and due to its dynamic nature, the severity of dengue fever will usually only be apparent around the effervescence phase during the transition of the febrile to the afebrile phase, okay? Which this often coincides to the critical phase. Now, patients suddenly, sudden onset. My internet is gone. Can you still hear me? Rashid?
Yes, Doc.
Okay. Now, again, this acute febrile phase usually lasts 2 to 7 days. And this is often accompanied by facial flushing, skin erythema, generalized body malaise, and then myalgia, arthralgia, retroorbital eye pain, photophobia, exanthema, and headache. There are some patients who may manifest with a sore throat, injected pharynx, and conjunctival injection. So anorexia, nausea, and vomiting are also common. Marasag ko ano, COVID. So actually, it is difficult to distinguish dengue clinically from non-dengue febrile diseases in the early febrile phase, because and a positive tourniquet test in this phase usually indicates an increased probability of dengue. However, these clinical features do not predict the severity of the disease. Therefore, it is crucial to monitor for warning signs and other clinical parameters in order to recognize the progression of the critical phase. Now, there are also mild hemorrhagic manifestations such as your petechiae and mucosal membrane bleeding. So usually, those are the things that you usually have to watch out for: the epistaxis, gum bleeding. These could be easily. This could be. The patient could also present this. So easy bruising is also seen in patients with dengue, and bleeding at the venipuncture sites is also present in some, wherein massive vaginal bleeding can occur, and GI bleeding may also occur during this phase, although this is not common. Now, the liver may be enlarged and tender after a few days of fever. That's why we also check for our liver enzymes. Usually we expect it to be elevated, So when we get a basic laboratories, you always include in the full blood count is a progressive decrease in the total white cell count. So there is that there is a high probability of. So, and in addition to symptoms that in their ability to progressive loss, and may have the tendency to bleed. So here is the critical phase. The warning signs mark the beginning of the critical phase. And this phase, as I mentioned a while ago, we're in phase. But instead of improving with the subsidence of high fever, patients with increased capillary permeability may manifest with the warning signs, mostly as a result of plasma leakage. Now, the warning signs, as seen here, mark the beginning of the critical phase, and these patients become worse around the time of effervescence, as I mentioned. So when the temperature starts to drop at around 37.5 to 38 degrees Celsius or less, and remains below this level, it usually happens on the third or eighth day, third to eighth day of illness. So as I mentioned, there will be progressive leukopenia, and then followed by a rapid decrease in the platelet count, which usually precedes the plasma leakage. So you can also notice an increased hematocrit above the baseline may be one of the earliest additional signs. So the period of clinical significant plasma leakage, this usually lasts mga 24 to 48 hours. So the degree of plasma, the degree of plasma leakage usually varies, So a rise in hematocrit precedes changes in blood pressure and also the pulse volume. So the degree of hemoconcentration above the baseline hematocrit reflects the severity of the plasma leakage. However, this may be reduced by early intravenous fluid therapy. So, di ba, what we always do when we have dengue patients is to be aggressive in our hydration, no? So, thus, ang frequent hematocrit determinations, when we look at the BCB, aside from the platelet, we should also look at the hematocrit determination, since they are the signal for the need for possible adjustments of the intravenous fluid. So when we get the serial CBCs, diba, you also look at the improvement of hematocrit. So there are complications, what can happen when there's severe plasma leakage. Pleural effusion and ascites are usually only clinically detectable after the IV fluid therapy. So you have to be careful. There are guidelines on how to give your IV fluids, and there's a certain dose that you can give, which I will be discussing later. So in addition to the plasma leakage, hemorrhagic manifestations can, such as easy bruising and bleeding at the venipuncture sites can frequently occur. So if patients with dengue fever, you should be careful in doing your venipuncture, no? So dapat one shoot lang jud kay if you have multiple, there's a chance for the patient to bleed jud ba, and it's difficult to control the bleeding. Okay. So next we have the recovery phase. Now, here, as the patient survives the 24 to 48-hour critical phase, there is a gradual reabsorption of the extravascular compartment fluid, which usually takes place in the following 48. So, ang critical, 24 to 48. And then when there is recovery phase na gani, mag-start na around 48 to 72 hours. Now, some patients will have a confluent erythematous or petechial rash with small areas of normal skin. This is described as also white in the sea of red, no? So usually, kuan siya ang description. What do you call ang rash kanang imuhang dengue? Does anyone know? Usually, when you kuan mga Herman's rash, di ba? You've heard about that. Okay. For the ECG findings, cardiac-wise, pwede po makuha ng patient. The patient may manifest with, can become bradycardic, and there could be ECG changes during this phase, during the recovery phase. And here, the hematocrit usually stabilizes or maybe lower due to the dilutional effect of the reabsorbed fluid. So the white blood cell count usually starts to rise during the recovery phase, but the recovery of the platelet count is typically later than that of the white blood cell count. Remember, usually when the critical phase, that's the time when your platelet count really drops, no? So it doesn't mean if the patient is already febrile that the patient is already safe. That's the time really that you have to monitor the patient more. Okay, so respiratory distress from massive pleural effusion can also occur, as well as ascites. Also pulmonary edema or congestive heart failure can occur during the critical or the recovery phase. So that's why you have to adjust your fluids eventually, be aggressive initially, but then you have to monitor monitor the CBC and adjust your fluids and look at your patient, of course. Okay. Basig nagkutas na imong patient, di ID ha, and then you have to really you have to adjust the fluids so that the patient will not congest. Okay. So several weeks after the convalescent period, from infection with dengue virus, di ba there are there's dengue virus 1, 2, 3, 4, mga serotypes nimo. The transient protection conferred by the infection against reinfection with the heterotypic dengue virus this usually decreases or it wanes. There is the presence or absence of enhancing non-neutralizing antibodies, and then age, which is also an important factor to consider, because the susceptibility to severe dengue drops considerably after 12 years of age. Okay, and then for the sex, no, females are more often affected than males, and for the race, the whites are more often affected than the blacks. So, in terms of the nutritional status, actually malnutrition is protective, no, and there a sequence of infections, no. There can also be a sequence of infections. Okay, of course, we can't be immune to the kuan, to the to the disease, no. So infection followed by dengue virus 2 infection seems to be more dangerous compared to that of dengue virus 4 infection. So okay. So severe dengue is identified by the detection of bleeding tendencies, no? So overt bleeding in the absence of underlying causes such as pre-existing gastrointestinal lesions. So shock can actually occur. So in milder cases of severe dengue, patient can be restless or lethargic with thrombocytopenia of less than 100,000, no? And the hemoconcentration are detected 2 to 5 days after the onset of the typical dengue, so usually at the time of defervescence. Now, the maculopapular rash that often develops in dengue may also appear in severe dengue, no? In more severe cases, frank shock is apparent with low pulse pressure, cyanosis, hepatomegaly, pleural effusion, and ascites in some patients. Severe ecchymosis can occur with as well as gastrointestinal bleeding, no? But the period of shock usually lasts only 1 to 2 days. So a virologic diagnosis of severe dengue can be made by the usual means. So that's it for severe dengue. Now, dengue can be classified by severity, no? So if you notice, no, we usually write a diagnosis of dengue with or without warning signs, no, or severe dengue. So when it's a probable dengue, of course, you have to get the history. If this patient lives or travel to a dengue endemic area, no, and then presents with fever and 2 of the following criteria, such as nausea, rash, aches and pain, tourniquet test positive, and leukopenia, or any warning sign, this could be probable dengue. So of course you have to have it confirmed, no? So by your diagnostics. So next, for the warning signs, of course, you have to, when you say there are warning signs, dengue with warning signs, you go again by history and physical exam. So if there's abdominal pain and tenderness, which could signify that there is bleeding, or if there's persistent vomiting or clinical fluid accumulation after your hydration, or if there's bleeding, no, and you look at your patient's status, no, if he's lethargic or restless, no. You also, like I mentioned a while ago, no, you have to also palpate the liver. Okay, it can be enlarged as well. So for the laboratories and warning signs, so you, of course, as mentioned, there can be an increase in your hematocrit and a decrease in thrombocytopenia. Now, for severe dengue, of course, there's severe plasma leakage, severe hemorrhage, and severe organ impairment. So the plasma leakage, like I mentioned a while ago, it can lead to shock and fluid accumulation with respiratory distress syndrome, no? And then, of course, it could, as mentioned a while ago, that could present with severe bleeding as well. So that's classified as severe dengue now. And involvement of your other organs, such as your liver, like I mentioned, no, your AST, that's why SGPT, your ALT should be monitored as well. It can go as high as more than 1,000. So neuro-wise, you look at the patient's sensorium. He can have impaired consciousness, no? And of course, like I mentioned a while ago, no, the heart and other organs can be affected, no? In ECG, there could be bradycardia or tachycardia, or patient may present with congestive heart failure. Okay, so here, as I mentioned, these are the dengue diagnostic sample characteristics of each diagnostics. No, we will not. I will not go through each. No, instead, one and us, no, and the time of results is usually minutes. Okay, but for areas, no, nga kanang it's not the ELISA test or the rapid and NS1 antigen tests are not available. You can always do a serial CBC monitoring, which for me is more okay. So these are for, as I mentioned a while ago, for the confirmed dengue infection, applicable in our setup. You usually get the NS1 antigen, no? So if these are positive, usually, of course, it's kuan siya ka ng positive for dengue. But also, if you get your IgG, IgM, you notice that there are you get the IgG and IgM. Okay, of course, there are different serotypes of dengue, no? So there could be an also a IgG seroconversion. So from negative IgG to a positive IgG in the paired sera, or a fourfold increase, no, of the IgG. This is what you if the IgG is positive already. So in acute serums, meaning in days 1 to 5 of the illness, no, you can get that, and then in the convalescent serum, or in 15 to 21 days after the first serum has been taken. Okay. So far, you have no questions? No questions so far?
None so far.
None so far, Doc.
Okay, sige. So again, so this is a stepwise approach to the management of dengue, no? So again, you look at your overall assessment, no? That's your step one. So this includes your history, your PE, and then of course you get your routine laboratory tests, no? And then the step two is, of course, you diagnose and assess the assessment of the disease phase, and then you also get end severity, and of course after that the management. So also if you have cases, no, of dengue which you receive lots of patients in a certain area, no, you have to notify, no, or your local center so that certain measures can be done, no, to prevent dengue from happening. Okay, so management decisions, no, we can this is depends on the clinical manifestations and other circumstances, no. Patient can be classified group to group A, B, and C. For patients in group A, they can be sent home. For C, could be should be referred to for in-hospital management, and then for group C, requires emergency treatment and urgent referral. Okay. So like I mentioned a while ago, group A, these are patients who are who can be sent home, and these are patients who are able to tolerate or adequate volumes of oral fluids, no, or can no kidney failure and can pass urine every 6 hours. They do not have any of the warning signs, particularly when the fever subsides, and of course you have to have stable hematocrit, no. So again, not all dengue patients have to be admitted, huh? So if there are no warning signs, no, when patient is stable, no, has stable vital signs, then it's okay to send the patient home and maybe have monitoring lang, no, of the CBC. So group B, as I mentioned, these are the patients who are referred for in-hospital care, no? So these are patients with any of the following features, no coexisting conditions such as pregnancy, infancy, or old age and BM, no, and then social circumstances such as living alone, living far from the hospital, no. So, it will be these patients at least have to be, if they need to be monitored, so they are advised to be admitted instead. And of course, if you have existing warning signs, then of course you have to admit the patient. So the group C is those are patients who require emergency treatment and with patients with any of the following features, no. So we have severe plasma leakage, no, with shock and or fluid accumulation with respiratory distress, or patients with severe bleeding or severe organ impairment, no. So which organs that can be affected? You can have a shutdown of your kidneys, you can have kidney failure, you can have no, mag-congest, mag-bleeding, no? Okay. Okay, for the management. Okay, before we proceed, everyone's okay, Ra? I'll proceed with the management na.
Yes, Doc.
Okay, so we have an algorithm for the fluid management. Like I mentioned a while ago, no, we have to be careful with our fluids, no, in treating dengue. So, di ba, kay mo naman dyan atong tambal, dengue is just supportive management raman jud na. So, but of course, and in giving your fluids, it's not like you just have to run fluids, no, it has to be completed as well. So for patients, patients with compensated shock, these are patients who have wherein the systolic pressure is maintained or plus signs of reduced perfusion. So you can start an isotonic or crystalloid, no? What are examples of these fluids? Isotonic or isotonic crystalloid? Makakuan lang mo once you go into your clinics, no? So mga plain LR, inana, no? Kuan. So you start this at a dose of 5 to 10 cc per kilogram per hour, and you give this for an hour, no? And then if there's an improvement, if there is, then you gradually decreases, no? Through 5 to 7 cc per kilogram per hour, 1 to 2 hours after, and then so on and so forth, no? So once there is clinical improvement, no, you reduce the fluids accordingly, and further boluses may be needed for the next 24 to 48 hours, no? So depende, no, wax and wane magud ni mga patients sa dengue. So that's why there should be close monitoring. And then at 48 hours, if the patient is stable, then of course you can stop your IV fluids na at 48 hours. Because if you overhydrate your patient, again, what will happen? You may push patient to respiratory failure, no? Mag-congest ang mga patient, okay? So after giving this again, if there is no improvement, okay, you check for your hematocrit, no? There is an increase and there is an increase hematocrit, there's hemoconcentration, so you give boluses, a second bolus of your colloid, you can give a 10 to 20 cc per kilogram per hour for an hour, and then if there is an improvement, then you reduce your IV crystalloids to 7 to 10 cc per kilogram per hour for 1 to 2 hours, okay? And then if your hematocrit is low, so dili ra kaayo concentrated na bit, you don't have to be so aggressive with your fluids. So of course you have to check for severe overt bleeding. Now if there's bleeding, then you do urgent blood transfusion. But if there is none, you can continue with your hydration at 10 to 20 cc per kilogram per hour, and then you evaluate to consider blood transfusion if there's no clinical improvement. So everyone got this? This is for patients na compensated ang shock, ha? And then this is another algorithm for patients na with hypotensive shock, okay? So same rang management for the children and adults. So okay, if there's hypotensive shock, sorry, you try to obtain a hematocrit level, of course, again, before your fluid resuscitation. So again, you can start your isotonic crystalloid or colloid, no? But I preferably crystalloids nimo. So if there's an improvement, if there is, then you adjust your fluids to 10 cc per kilogram per hour for 1 hour, and then reduce gradually as follows. And then if there is clinical improvement, then you reduce the fluids further, no, and accordingly. So at 48 hours, you stop the IV fluids. That is if your patient responds and is stable, no. So, but if there is no improvement, so like kuan, you check for the hematocrit. If there is hemoconcentration, so you give at 10 cc per kilogram per hour for 30 to 60 minutes. And if there's an improvement, you can reduce your fluids. But if at a dose of as follows, no? So if there is, if your hematocrit, if there is improvement, again, if there's no improvement, then you check your hematocrit. And then if your hematocrit is low, and then there is severe overt bleeding, so you do urgent transfusion. And again, if there is no bleeding, you continue with your hydration as follows, okay? So the question is, when do you stop your IV fluid therapy? The bite says here is at 48, but of course you have to look at your patient, no? Kaning you have to assess, no, and develop your clinical eye. Okay, so when do you stop your IV fluid therapy? This is when any of the following signs are present, or your IV fluid should be reduced or discontinued when there are cessation of your plasma leakage, when your BP is stable, your vital signs are stable, and there is a good peripheral perfusion. And then if your hematocrit decreases in the presence of a good pulse volume, and of course, for patients who have adequate urine output, or their urine output, if there are signs of improvement of urine output. Okay, so after this, what's your criteria for discharging your patient? So you look at your clinical and your laboratories, okay? For the clinical, if there is no fever for 48 hours, and then if there is improvement in the clinical status, meaning you look at the patient's general well-being, the appetite, the hemodynamic status, the urine output, and patient, of course, is not in distress. For the laboratories, you can see the increasing trend of platelet count. So, no, you don't necessarily have to wait until your platelet normalizes for you to discharge the patient. If you can see the trend that it's really increasing, and then the patient is stable, then you can discharge the patient, no? And then, of course, again, with a stable hematocrit without your IV fluids, okay? So let's go back to our case, no? So we presented with a patient who 20-year-old with high-grade fever, myalgia, petechiae, and then with the following vital sign, thrombocytopenic in hemoconcentration. So of course, our diagnosis, sorry. What's your diagnosis? Dengue fever with or without hemorrhagic, with or without warning signs? With or without? It's with warning signs, no? With warning signs. And then, so diagnosis is either dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue with warning signs. And this, of course, you can confirm this by what? The laboratories that we discussed, which is applicable to us, the NS1 antigen or the IgM ELISA, okay? So again, as a review, the dengue virus has there are four serotypes. No, the pathophysio of the dengue virus is if there is a secondary infection. This will lead to an antibody-dependent enhancement, leading to capillary leak. No, so and then our management again. There was an algorithm, right? So fluid resuscitation, which preferred. What's the preferred fluid? Your crystalloids, huh? No, instead of your colloids, no? Crystalloids are preferred. And of course, you avoid your NSAIDs and aspirin. Of course, when there is kidney failure, no? So you have to avoid our NSAIDs. And of course, aspirin, kay magkuan man, imong platelet is going down, di ba? So can lead to further bleeding. Okay? So management, aside from fluid resuscitation and aside from avoiding NSAIDs and aspirin, you have to monitor hematocrit and platelet count closely, okay? And then you do blood transfusion, of course, if there is severe bleeding. And of course, the most important is prevention, no? Vector control. That's why you have to notify if a certain area has many cases of dengue fever. Okay. There was a Dengvaxia vaccine before, Biba, for previously infected individuals, but it did not push through here in our setup. Okay. So no questions for dengue fever? Okay, we'll proceed.
None so far.
Mata pa mo?
Yes, Doc.
Yes,
Yes,
Doc.
Doc.
Okay, basig na nga tug na mo diha, ha? Soothing ba kanya kong voice?
Wala
Makaduka.
pa na, Doc.
Sige, sige. Okay, next we'll proceed. I'll start again with another case, no? So this is a second case. A 19-year-old male bitten by a stray dog on the right leg 3 weeks ago. The wound was cleaned at home, but no medical care or no medical consult was sought. He now presents with fever, agitation, difficulty swallowing water, and hypersalivation. And physical exam, he is anxious, has aerophobia, and intermittent periods of confusion. No salient features, unvaccinated animal, hydrophobia and aerophobia, which is pathognomonic, no, for rabies. Obvious naman ha, so nidiretso na lang ko kuan ninyo rabies. Have you ever seen a patient with rabies?
Wala pa, Doc.
Yes, Doc.
Wala pa po, Doc.
Wala pa, Doc.
Klaro, jud kay sila. Even yung padung pa na, they cover themselves with kuan, a blanket. It's true jud na, no? They are hydrophobic and aerophobic jud. That's why kung magtabo na gani anything, no? Kay they don't want to kuan kay magspasm man gud na, so it causes pain or kuan, no? So typical kay na sila, they get scared, no? So tinuod jud na ang hydrophobia or aerophobia. Now, rapid progression, here another say rapid progression to coma and death. 100% bitaw if rabies na kuan, 100% jud ang mortality. Okay? Incubation period for rabies, 20 to 90 days is the typical, but rapid progression can lead to coma and death again. Sorry, nadoble. So let's proceed. So rabies, this is a rapidly progressive acute infectious disease of the central nervous system in humans and animals, no? Infection normally transmitted from animal vectors, no? Can rabies occur in other animals? Huh? Yes, no?
Yes, Doc.
Yes, Doc.
Yes, Doc.
What other animals do you think can cause rabies?
Monkeys, bats.
Yes, very good. Okay, so there are go through phases, no, of rabies. They have the encephalitic and the paralytic form that eventually leads to death. So mula gini ang kakuan aning rabies 100%. So still prevention, no, is the best cure, no. Get our animals vaccinated or pets vaccinated. But of course, you don't have control over those who are stray animals. Okay, for rabies, of course, now the etiologic agent is the rabies virus, no, from the family Rhabdoviridae. No, there are two genera, the lyssavirus and the vesiculovirus. No, it infects broad range of animals and causes serious neurologic disease when this is transmitted to humans. Okay, the rabies is a single-stranded RNA virus. It is non-segmented, negative sense genome or antisense, no, that consists of nucleotides. Di na ma-memorize, no? It encodes for 5 proteins. You have the nucleocapsid protein, the phosphoprotein, the matrix protein, the glycoprotein, and the large polymerase protein. Okay? Sige. So epidemiology, it is of course a zoonotic infection that occurs in a variety of mammals throughout the world, except in Antarctica, no, and on some islands, no. usually transmitted by to humans by the bite of an infected animal. So worldwide, endemic canine rabies is estimated to cause 59,000 human deaths annually. So most of these deaths occur in Asia and Africa. So with rural populations and children most frequently affected. Okay. So therefore, in many resource poor and resource limited countries, no, the canine rabies continues to be a threat to humans. So there are areas, like I said, no, in Latin America, wherein rabies control efforts in dogs have been quite successful in recent years. So swerte ka sila what sila rabies. Um, there are the endemic canine rabies has been eliminated in the United States and most other resource-rich countries. But in wildlife species and a variety of animal reservoirs, no, they have been identified in in different countries of the world, no. Okay. So like I said, no, dili ra kay the other animals, no, have rabies, no, but it is most human rabies is transmitted through dogs. In North America, human disease is usually associated with transmission from bats, no. So in countries with endemic canine rabies and dog-to-dog transmission, human cases can be imported by travelers returning from those regions. Now, there may be no known history of bat bite or other bat exposure in these cases. So, and most human cases are due to bat rabies. Virus variant associated with silver-haired and tricolored bats, one that's unusual. And these are small bats whose bite may not be recognized, and the virus is adapted for replication at the skin temperature and in cell types that are present in the skin. So for the pathogenesis, no, um, incubation period, like I mentioned 20 to 90 days, but in rare cases, it is either as short as a few days to more than a year. So during most of the incubation period, no, rabies virus is thought to be present at or close to the site of inoculation, no, using the kuan. So in muscles, um, in the muscles, uh, the virus is known to bind to nicotinic acetylcholine receptors on the postsynaptic membranes at the neuromuscular junction, no? But the exact details of viral entry uh, into the skin and subcutaneous tissues has actually not yet been clarified. Now, for the rabies virus spreads centripetally along the peripheral nerves, no, and towards the spinal cord or brainstem via a retrograde, no, spinal cord, retrograde fast axonal transport. This is approximately with a rate up to 250 millimeters per day, no, with delays at intervals of approximately 12 hours at each synapse. No, once the virus enters the CNS, it rapidly disseminates to other regions of the CNS via the fast axonal transport along the neuroanatomic connection. So the neurons, no, the neurons are prominently infected in rabies. So infection of astrocytes, however, is usually is unusual. So after the CNS infection becomes established, there is centrifugal spread along the sensory and autonomic nerves to other tissues, including the salivary glands, your heart, and then the adrenal glands, and then the skin. No, and the rabies then replicate in the acinar cells and other salivary glands, and this is secreted in the saliva of the rabid animals that serve as the vectors of the disease. So, however, there is no well-documented evidence of hematogenous spread of rabies. So, mostly through the saliva of the rabid animal. So, so when you get a sample of the pathologic studies show mild, di ba, makuha man mo og ang diagnostic jud is to get a sample of the of the of the rabid animals brain, and it will show mild inflammatory changes in the CNS with mononeural inflammatory infiltration in the leptomeninges, the perivascular regions, and the parenchyma, including the microglial nodules. No, so degenerative neuronal changes are not prominent, and there is little evidence of neuronal death. So neuronophagia is observed occasionally. So actually, the pathologic changes are surprisingly mild in light of the clinical severity and fatal outcome of the disease. So again, the pathogenesis, the most characteristic pathologic findings is the Negri body. No, they are not observed, however, in all cases of rabies. Now, ang imuhang Negri body, these are eosinophilic, no, eosinophilic inclusions in the cytoplasm, some in the brain neurons that are composed of rabies virus proteins and viral RNA. And then these inclusions occur in a minority of infected neurons, and they are commonly observed in the Purkinje cells of the cerebellum and pyramidal neurons of the hippocampus. No? So ang basis nimo actually for behavioral changes, including the aggressive behavior of the rabid animals, is not well understood actually, but may be related to the infection of the serotonergic neurons in the brainstem. So clinical manifestations, they are usually suspected on the basis of the clinical presentation. No, they present as atypical encephalitis where relative preservation of consciousness. They may be difficult to be recognized in the clinical course when the progression to coma has occurred. So in rabies, the emphasis for post-exposure prophylaxis initiated after a recognized exposure and before any symptoms of signs develop. So the rabies should usually be suspected on the basis of clinical presentation. Okay, so a minority of patients present with acute flaccid paralysis, and there are also prodromal or acute neurologic manifestations and comatose phases that usually progress to death despite aggressive therapy. So again, these are the clinical stages of rabies. You have the incubation period, 20 to 90 days. Now, usually there are signs and symptoms are usually none, but in 2 to 10 days, the prodrome stage, the patient presents with fever, malaise, anorexia, nausea, vomiting, or pruritus at the wound site. And then, so for the acute neurologic disease, once it's affected, we have, like I mentioned a while ago, there's the encephalitic and the paralytic. No, encephalitic is 80% of cases. Usually, occurs 2 to 7 days, and patient presents with anxiety, agitation, hyperactivity, and bizarre behavior, hallucinations, and hydrophobia. For the paralytic, typical duration is 2 to 10 days. This occurs mga 20% lang. No, there is flaccid paralysis in the limbs, progressing to quadriparesis with facial paralysis. And coma and death is usually depende sa kuan 0 to 14 days. No, so the prodromal features. No, the clinical features of rabies, again, begin with non-specific prodromal manifestations. This includes fever, malaise, headache, nausea, and vomiting. No, and the anxiety or agitation may also occur. Now, the earliest specific neurologic symptoms of rabies, these include paresthesia, pain, or pruritus near the the site of exposure, or one or more of which occur in 50 to 80% of patients, and this strongly suggests rabies. So the wound has usually healed by this point, and these symptoms probably reflect infection with associated inflammatory changes in the local dorsal root or cranial sensory ganglia. Now we have the encephalitic rabies, like I mentioned a while ago. This is distinguished by early brainstem involvement and results in the classic features of hydrophobia and aerophobia. No, so muna siya, like I mentioned, there are two neurologic forms of rabies. So muna siyang encephalitic, or what we call the furious phase, no, which occurs in 80%. Di ba katong paralytic, mga kuan lang, more or less 20% lang. Okay? So here, autonomic dysfunction is common, and this results in what we commonly the hypersalivation, goose flesh, cardiac arrhythmia, and priapism, no? In the encephalitic rabies, so there is episodes of hyperexcitability and are typically followed by periods of complete lucidity, and they become shorter as the disease progresses. So some of the manifestations of the encephalitic rabies includes fever, confusion, hallucinations, combativeness, and seizures, no? And kanang kuan, I forgot to mention that hydrophobia is actually an involuntary painful contraction of the diaphragm and accessory respiratory laryngeal and pharyngeal muscles in response to swallowing liquids, no? So typical jud kay ni once gani kuan jud siya, pathognomonic jud ni siya sa rabies. And aerophobia, the same features, which is caused by stimulation from a draft of air. Munang tabon kay na ang mga patients when you see them and coming to the ER. Okay? So the combination of your hypersalivation and pharyngeal dysfunction is also responsible for the classic appearance of the foaming of the mouth, no? And then the brainstem dysfunction progresses rapidly and followed and coma and followed within days by death. This is the rule unless the course is prolonged by supportive measures. No, with such measures, late complications can include you have your cardiac, respiratory failure, disturbances of water balance. So SIAD can occur actually, or syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone secretion, or diabetes insipidus. So there could also non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema can also occur, as well as GI bleeding. No, for the paralytic rabies, again, as 20% of patients have paralytic rabies, and patients present with muscle weakness, predominating with the cardinal features of encephalitic rabies, no, hyperexcitability, hydrophobia, and aerophobia are lacking. So early and prominent flaccid muscle weakness often beginning in the bitten extremity and spread to produce quadriparesis and facial weakness. Okay. So actually in dengue fever, in rabies, no, sphincter involvement is common. So sensory involvement is usually mild, and these cases are that's why you commonly misdiagnosed as GBS or the Guillain-Barré syndrome. I don't know if you're familiar with this disease, no? Mga ascending paralysis. Patients with paralytic rabies generally survive a few days longer than those with encephalitic rabies, but multi-organ failure nevertheless occurs. So no questions so far. So okay, for the laboratory investigations, no routine laboratory tests. Of course, you have to yield in the rabies yield normal results or show non-specific abnormalities. So you can get CBC, complete. Are you in the CBC is usually normal as well. Sa CSF, no, through a lumbar puncture, this often reveals mononuclear cell pleocytosis with a mildly elevated protein level. And there is severe pleocytosis, meaning more than 1,000 white cells per microliter, is unusual and should prompt a search for an alternative diagnosis. So CT scans are usually normal again in rabies. So what do not siya role CT scan or MRI, no? Even the MRI brain scans, they may show signal abnormalities in the brainstem or in other in the gray matter areas, but these findings are variable and still non-specific, no? So imaging is usually performed to exclude other diagnostic possibilities. So usually diagnosis of exclusion. So the laboratories instead are being done to exclude other diseases, no? So important tests in suspected cases of rabies include those that may identify an alternative or potentially treatable diagnosis. So the diagnostically useful specimens include your serum, CSF, fresh saliva, skin biopsy samples from the neck and brain tissue, no? Which of course is rarely obtained before death. And then because skin biopsies rely on the demonstration of the rabies virus antigen in the cutaneous nerves at the base of the hair follicles, no? Samples are usually from the hairy skin at the nape of the neck. So also, corneal impression smears are of low diagnostic yield and are generally not performed. So a negative antemortem rabies-specific laboratory test never exclude a diagnosis of rabies, and these tests may need to be repeated after an interval of diagnostic confirmation. So we have the rabies virus-specific antibodies. In a previously unimmunized patient, serum neutralizing antibodies to the rabies virus are diagnostic of rabies. No, so the presence of rabies virus-specific neutralizing antibodies in the CSF can suggest encephalitis, regardless of the immunization status of the patient. However, diagnosis of rabies is still questionable in patients who recover from their illness without developing serum neutralizing antibodies to the rabies vaccine, rabies virus. So these are just mga further tests, no? I think not really kuana jud, no? Not very important. Suffice to know na there are available tests for these are available tests, no? The direct fluorescein antibody testing, no? And then for the differential diagnosis, no? So early neurologic symptoms, actually the diagnosis of rabies may be difficult, no? Without a history, especially if we don't get a history of animal exposure or exposure to an animal. So the presentation of rabies is usually quite different from that of acute viral encephalitis due to most other acute viral encephalitis due to other causes such as the herpes simplex nga encephalitis and mga arboviral nimo nga encephalitis such as the West Nile encephalitis. So it may also occur as a sequelae of immunization with rabies vaccine derived from neural tissues which are used only in resource-limited and resource-poor countries, no? The rabies may present with unusual neuropsychiatric symptoms and may be misdiagnosed as a psychiatric disorder. So, muna mukuan silang buang ba crazy, no? Mga rabid patients. So, as mentioned, the paralytic rabies may mimic also the GBS or the Guillain-Barré syndrome, no? In these cases, fever or bladder dysfunction, a normal sensory examination, and CSF pleocytosis favor a diagnosis of rabies, whereas ang Guillain-Barré syndrome may occur as a complication of rabies vaccination with a neural tissue. So it is important, no, to include in your history the vaccinations of rabies. Okay. So for treatment, unfortunately, no, there is no established treatment for rabies. No, aggressive management with supportive care in critical care units has resulted in the survival of more than 15 patients. No, so more supportive. So depende ra sa patient kung kuan niya, no, malabang niya himself, no, sa disease, sa course. So. And of course, we have to have an expert opinion before a course of experimental therapy is embarked upon, no? A palliative approach can be done, but and may be appropriate for many patients. So more of palliative na lang ang treatment. So for the prognosis, kay almost uniformly, this is a uniformly fatal disease, but it's nearly always preventable. No, so again, prevention is the best cure gihapon. So um, all but one of the, more than 15 documented survivors of rabies receive one or more doses of the rabies vaccine. So these are most of these patients who survive rabies mangani are those patients who had the vaccine. So a single survivor who had not received vaccine and neutralizing antibodies to the rabies virus in the serum and CSF at clinical presentation. So surte ra niya siya nga patient, no? So most patients with rabies die within several days at the onset of the illness. So despite the aggressive care. So, so again, since there is no effective therapy for rabies, it is extremely important to prevent the disease after animal exposure. No, so this figure Kuan shows the steps involved in making decisions about your post-exposure prophylaxis. So this based on the basis of the exposure history and local epidemic information, the physician must decide whether initiation of post-exposure prophylaxis is needed. No, so let's go by this, no? Okay, you will actually when you will go, especially if you rotate in kuan, no, in government hospitals, there are mga kuano who we have a program, no, for patients who are given prophylaxis, no. So and the okay, of course the vaccine mangod is quite expensive, so the government has already made a program na wherein the patients can afford at least or share, no, or kanang makuan ang dose kay the vaccine is given based on the patient's dose man. Okay, so here let's go by so if the animal bite, if the animal bite of the patient, or did the saliva contaminate the scratch, abrasion, open wound, or the mucous membrane? If no, then you don't need prophylaxis. But if yes, and then there are rabies, there's known or suspected to be present in the species and the geographic area. If no, then no need for prophylaxis. But if yes, was the animal captured? If no, then you give your immunoglobulin and your vaccine, no? If yes, then was the animal a normally behaving dog, cat, or ferret? So if yes, does the animal become ill under observation over the next 10 days? So mo ni ang usual ni ikuan, no? When you get the history, was the patient vaccinated, was the dog or pet vaccinated, and if is it owned, was it, or was the during the bite, was the animal provoked or not provoked? If the animal is not stray, so it's more advantageous for the patient kay di ba, you can observe the patient and observe over the next 10 days kay if the dog is or the animal is rabid, the animal will eventually die. Okay, so so if a normally behaving dog or cat or ferret is behaving, so if no, does a laboratory examination of the brain by fluorescent antibody staining confirm rabies? If yes, then you give the vaccine or prophylaxis. If no, then no need for giving to give the prophylaxis. Okay. So healthy dogs, cats, or ferrets may be confined, as I mentioned, no, for 10 days. Na it is not prophylaxis is not necessary if the animal remains healthy. So if the animal develops signs of rabies during the observation period, no, they should be euthanized, no, and the head should be transported to the laboratory under refrigeration, no. Kita, we have to send the kuan to Manila pa. So imagine having to send the head of the animal, no, to kuan. So having to send it to Manila pa. So any animal other than dog, cat, or ferret should be euthanized immediately, and the heads submitted for laboratory examination, like I mentioned. So if there's high-risk exposures and in areas where canine rabies is endemic, the rabies prophylaxis should be initiated without waiting for the lab results. So just give na lang, no? Then better be safe than sorry. So if the laboratory test proved to be negative, then it may be safely be concluded that the animal's saliva did not contain rabies and immunization should be discontinued. But then again, if it were me, I'd still give the vaccination. So for wound care, post-exposure prophylaxis includes local wound care. That's very important, no? In both active and current recommendations are followed very closely because of minor deviations, no? Wound care, most importantly, should not be delayed, even if the initiation of the immunization is postponed, pending the results of the 10-day. We have the post-exposure prophylaxis. If it is not readily available, it should be administered no later than 7 days after the first vaccine dose. So, diba, you can give to this passively immunized with rabies immune globulin, no? So, mo ni siya. Okay. So after day 7, endogenous antibodies are being produced and passive immunization may actually be counterproductive na. Okay? So you give the entire dose of 20 IU per kilogram, no? So imagine having mga kuan, you have to the dosage should be computed based on the patient's weight. Okay? So I think a certain one vial can cost around mga 2,000 to 3,000. Imagine if you have to kuan pila ka vials ang gamiton, no? So the rabies vaccine and the rabies immunoglobulin should never be administered at the same site or within the same syringe, no? There are, like I said, commercially available. Muna siya ang rabies nga immunoglobulin niya. This is purified from the serum of hyperimmunized human donors, no? Now, there are also human rig preparations, which are much better tolerated than those of the equine-derived preparations, which are still being used. We actually, Philippines is one of them. No, we still use the equine-derived preparations, but sadly, these are the ones which wherein the patients manifest with kanang side effects. Serious side effects are less in human rabies immunoglobulin. Only probably the patient will present with fever, no, or pain at the site of injection. So for post-exposure prophylaxis, again, you give 1 ml doses of rabies vaccine. It should be given intramuscularly in the deltoid area. Ideally, the first dose should be given as soon as possible after exposure. And then there are, and should not be delayed, and 3 additional doses should be given in days. So you give the dose, so day 0, 3, 7, and 14. So a 5th dose on day 28 actually is no longer recommended. Okay. Actually, pregnancy is not a contraindication for immunization. No? Glucocorticoids and other immunosuppressive medications may interfere with the development of active immunity. Therefore, should not be administered during post-exposure prophylaxis. So, if the immunoglobulin is unavailable, you can use the equine, like I mentioned a while ago. The dose is 40 IU per kilogram, and if the human na doble. Okay. So local reactions usually, as I mentioned, are pain, erythema, and pruritus, no? One ang usual complaints. Okay. So, like I mentioned, 07, 21, 20, or katong 28 not recommended already. Kato lang first, no? Akong state. This is for the pre-exposure rabies vaccination. Is given as 07, 21, or 28. So When a previously immunized individual is exposed to rabies, two booster doses of vaccine should be administered on days 0 and 3. So let's go back to our case. So 19-year-old male bitten by a stray dog with no medical care, presented with fever, agitation, difficulty in swallowing, hypersalivation. So of course, no diagnosis is unsang akoan the furious form, no? Rabies encephalitis, no? And this can be confirmed by clinical diagnosis by the RT-PCR or DFA test from the saliva or the nuchal skin biopsy, no? Causative agent of rabies, nangatog na mo. And it is rabies virus, neurotropic RNA virus of the Lissa virus genus, no? Pathogenesis, the virus travels via the peripheral nerves to the CNS, causing fatal encephalitis. Okay, for this patient, what do we do? Do we give post-exposure prophylaxis? Yes. So first thing you do wound cleansing with soap and water or povidone iodine. You give the vaccine, no? At 1 ml IM on days 0, 3, 7, 14. And you also give your immunoglobulin, which is infiltrated around the wound and intramuscularly, the remainder intramuscularly. This is for category 3 exposure, huh? And then one symptomatic, of course, no, almost universally fatal. So our management is only supportive. No questions for rabies? Let's proceed. Okay, case number 3. So I'll try to make this fast. Sorry, Kayo. 35-year-old male farmer presenting with jaw stiffness and painful muscle spasms for 7 days, sustained a puncture wound on his foot from a rusty nail. There is no prior immunization against tetanus. He developed trismus, rhesus sardonicus, and board-like rigidity of the abdomen. No, his vital signs showed tachycardia and mild fever. Salient features: contaminated wound in an anaerobic environment with 7 days post injury, with the typical incubation period of 3 to 21 days. Classic triad of tetanus: trismus, muscle rigidity, and spasm, which are triggered by a stimuli. Okay. So tetanus is an acute disease manifested by skeletal muscle spasm, autonomic nervous system, no? In developed countries, the disease is seen occasionally in individuals. Established tetanus is a severe disease with a high mortality rate. Now, tetanus is caused by a neurotoxin by the bacterium Clostridium tetani and is completely preventable by vaccination. So, from the CDC, probable tetanus, you can diagnose, no, as an acute. Of course, you can't wait you just for the cultures, no. So it can be probable tetanus if it is an acute illness with muscle spasms or hypertonia in the absence of a more like diagnosis, absence or could be more or less a likely diagnosis, no, for tetanus. So neonatal tetanus does not go through that. Maternal tetanus, it can occur during pregnancy or within 6 weeks after the conclusion of pregnancy, whether this is with birth, during birth, miscarriage, or abortion. No, so that's why TT is given during pregnancy. It's always given. Okay, so this, as I mentioned, etiology is the Clostridium tetani, which is an anaerobic gram-positive spore forming rod, and which are the spores are actually highly resilient, no? And the spores, they can resist boiling and many disinfectants. So at very low concentrations, this toxin can result in tetanus, no? Minimal lethal dose actually 2.5 nanograms per kilogram. Okay. So in 20 to 30% of cases of tetanus, there's no puncture entry wound is found, no? And superficial abrasions to the limbs are the most common infection sites in adults. In neonates, infection of the umbilical stump can result from inadequate umbilical cord care, no? So deeper infections such as due to an open fracture, abortion, or drug injection, these are usually associated with more severe disease outcomes and worse outcomes. In some cultures, for example, the cord is, in some cultures, uh, the cord is cut with grass or animal dung is applied to the stump sa kuan ba for patients with in babies, no, they still practice that. Okay, it is a rare disease actually in the developed world, common here. So in my kuan, I've seen mga kuan siguro mga 2 or 3 tetanus patients, no, during my internship until consultancy. So most cases occur in incompletely vaccinated or unvaccinated individuals. Usually persons of more than 60 years of age are greater risk of tetanus because of the antibody levels decrease over time. And people who inject drugs, no, 15% comprise 15% of all cases. So these are people who inject drugs, particularly those injecting heroin subcutaneously, diba? There's kuan ka ng skin popping. These are increasingly recognized as high risk. So when you look at your kuan, if look for patients with history of drug abuse, no. So pathogenesis, of course, no, kanang bacteria producing the tetanus toxin can cause tetanus. No, this is known as the tetanus spasmin. And this is intraaxonally transported to the motor nuclei of the cranial nerve or ventral horns of the spinal cord. And it is produced as a single 150 kilodaltons protein and is cleaved to produce heavy and light chains linked by disulfide bond and non-convalescent forces. No? So this is a ano. These are the sites of the tetanus spasmin, okay? Wherein the binding results in toxin internalization and uptake into the nerves, as I mentioned a while ago, okay? So how do you approach the patient? So the clinical manifestations occur only after the tetanus toxin has reached presynaptic inhibitory nerves. So once these effects become apparent, there may be little that can be done to affect the disease progression. So treatment should not be delayed, but the results of laboratory tests are awaited, while we wait for the laboratory tests. Management strategies aim to neutralize remaining unbound toxin and support vital function until the effects of the toxin have worn off. So recent interest has actually been focused on intrathecal methods of antitoxin administration to neutralize toxin within the CNS and limit disease progression, no? So these are the clinical manifestations. So actually the patient presents with a spectrum of clinical features that are broadly divided into the generalized, no, and local. In the usually mild form of local tetanus, only isolated areas of the body are affected and only small areas of the local muscle spasm may be apparent. So the most common initial symptoms is what? Trismus or lockjaw, right? Muscle pain and stiffness, back pain and difficulty in swallowing. Okay. As the disease progresses, muscle spasm develops, and generalized muscle spasm can be very, very painful. Okay. So in assessing for the prognosis of the patient, the speed at which tetanus develops is important. So the incubation period, which is the time from wound to the first symptom, and the period of the onset, no, which is the time from the first symptom to the first generalized symptom. So this is an algorithm found in your book. If there are, so for the clinical and pathologic progression of tetanus, no, wound infection, multiplication of the Clostridium tetani, usually there are no symptoms yet. After 7 to 10 days, the toxin uptake, and there's a uptake of the tetanus toxin, initial symptoms will present with muscle aches, trismus, and myalgia. And in 24 to 72 hours for the toxin effects causing widespread disinhibition of motor and autonomic nervous system, no? So dili na, no? The muscle spasm, which can be local or generalized, the cardiovascular instability, wherein this, the BP may be labile, no? Or it could be present with tachy or bradycardia. And there is fever, increased respiratory and GI secretion, which takes 4 to 6 weeks. There's cessation of spasms, restoration of the normal muscle tone, and the cardiovascular and autonomic control. So actually, the diagnosis is also clinical, no? And treatment should not be delayed while laboratory tests are conducted. So of course, ang ultimate for you to diagnose is the culture, no? Culture of the Clostridium tetani. Serum anti-tetanus immunoglobulin may also may be measured in a sample taken before the administration of antitoxin or immunoglobulin. So if there are levels more than 0.1, they are deemed protective and do not support the diagnosis of tetanus. There are PCR, which also being used for detection and tetanus toxin, but the sensitivity is still unknown. So, okay. So for the diagnosis, again, generalized tetanus, no, can be striking poisoning or dystonic reactions to the anti-dopaminergic drugs. And then you have your also cephalic tetanus, which can be confused with your trismus or other etiology, such as your oropharyngeal infection. Hypocalcemia, no? It can more similar, mag-trismus or spasms, no? Oral spasms or meningoencephalitis are included in the differential diagnosis. How do you treat? Okay, so of course, the entry wound should be identified. It should be clean. There's necrosis. Metronidazole antibiotic every hour service. Okay, may be but there is only so the failure to remove pockets of ongoing infection may result in recurrent or prolonged tetanus. So again, the antitoxin should be given early in an attempt to deactivate any circulating tetanus toxin. There are two preparations available. You have your tetanus immunoglobulin and the equine antitoxin, okay, your TIG and your TT, no? The TIG is the preparation of choice, and it is less likely to be associated with anaphylactoid reaction. So it is those katong TT wherein patients will usually have a kanang hypersensitivity reaction. A single dose is given at a dose of 3,000 to 5,000 IU, and with a portion injected around the wound, okay? And then you also have your equine-derived antitoxin, which is available widely, no, and is usually used in low-income countries. Again, this is what you usually use, no. Anti-IG is expensive, so mostly we give the antitoxin. So hypersensitivity testing must you give this at a dose. Usually we don't give we do the hypersensitivity testing, but in Harrison's it's still written there. Anyways, in the Philippine setup, we don't usually do the testing anymore. So 10,000 to 20,000 units is administered IM as a single dose or as a divided doses, okay? So for the treatment, if spasms are there, it is controlled by heavy sedation with benzodiazepines. And there is a respiratory, most patients are eventually intubated, diba? Chlorpromazine and phenobarbital are commonly used as for sedation. And IV magnesium sulfate can be used as a muscle relaxant. So, oh, by the way, it is also with treatment. You should be careful. No, okay. Patient may be especially in giving the magnesium sulfate could cause respiratory depression. Okay. For so therefore, like I said a while ago, eventually if the airway to secure the airway by early intubation, patients should be nursed in a calm or quiet environments because of light and noise can trigger the spasm, which can be very painful for the patient. No, tracheal secretions are increased in tetanus, and dysphagia due to pharyngeal involvement combined with hyperactivity of the laryngeal muscles makes intubation difficult. So the patients who may need ventilator support for several weeks, and usually what if they can't wean the patient from the mechanical ventilation, then tracheostomy is the usual method of securing the airway. These are in cases of severe tetanus. Okay. So cardiovascular stability is improved by of course you increase sedation with magnesium sulfate and morphine, fentanyl, or other sedatives. No, there are drugs which acting specifically on the cardiovascular system. So we have the esmolol, the calcium antagonist, and the inotropes may be required. We have short-acting drugs are preferable so that to allow rapid titration. So patients be given a full primary course of immunization as tetanus toxin is poorly immunogenic and the immune response following natural infection is inadequate. So there are, however, complications which arise from treatment, and these includes thrombophlebitis, associated with diazepam injection, ventilator associated. Eventually, the patient may develop VAP or central line infections and septicemia. In some centers, prophylaxis against DVT and thromboembolism is routine. So, and recovery from the tetanus we usually takes 4 to 6 weeks. So that's why eventually patient is inserted with a tracheostomy is usually done. No. For prognosis, so those associated with poor prognosis will just focus on the adults for ages more than 7. These include patients with age more than 70 years old, 70 years, incubation period of less than 7 days, short time from first symptom to admission, and then we have puerperal, IV, post-surgery or burn entry sites. No, period of onset is less than 48 hours. So heart rate of more than 140, systolic BP of more than 140, and severe disease or spasms, and with and patient being febrile. No, these are associated with poor prognosis. So for prevention, again, it's still the best cure. No, so for tetanus vaccination, it consists of a primary course of 3 doses in infancy. So boosters given at 4 to 7 and 12 to 15 years of age, and then you can give another booster in adulthood. No, so catch-up schedules recommend a 3-dose primary course with 4 weeks between doses. This is followed by 2 boosters at 6 months apart. And then for persons who have received a complete primary course in childhood but no further boosters, 2 doses at least 4 weeks apart are recommended. Okay, so as mentioned here, no questions so far?
None, Doc.
None
Okay,
so far,
proceed
Doc.
na ha. Sige. For pregnant women, the WHO recommends for prevention of maternal and neonatal tetanus for administration of 2 doses of tetanus toxoid at least 4 weeks apart to previously unimmunized pregnant women. However, in high-risk areas, more intensive approach has been successful with all women of childbearing age receiving a primary course along with education on safe delivery and postnatal practices. So, individuals sustaining tetanus-prone wounds should be immunized if their vaccination status is incomplete or unknown. So, or if their last booster was more than 10 years. Yeah, if the vaccine status of the patient is inadequate and sustained wounds not classified as clean or minor, the patient should also undergo immunization with TIG. So or tetanus immunoglobulin. Yeah, it is recommended that tetanus toxoid should be given in conjunction with the diphtheria toxoid in preparation with or without a cellular pertussis. Anyway, I think you've already if you already nakakuha na mo sa pedia, no? So DTaP for children less than 7 years, TD for 7 to 9 years, and TDAP for children more than 9 years. Okay, and TDAP for children more than 9 years old and adults. Okay. So let's go back to this case. As a kuan, so we diagnosed this patient with generalized tetanus, being the clinical diagnosis. So again, causative organism, what is it? Clostridium tetani, or spore-forming anaerobe producing tetanus plasmine or neurotoxin. So what is your management for this patient? Wound debridement, you can give TIG, tetanus immunoglobulin with at a dose of 500 IU per IM. Antibiotics, what is the preferred antibiotics? Hello, metronidazole, right? So given it a dose of 500 milligrams IV Q6 or every 8 hours. And then you give benzodiazepines for spasm control, of course, airway support and minimal stimulate, put the patient in an environment where there is minimal stimulation. And then you have to begin active immunization with TDAP, okay? So again, for prevention, there you have to, again, routine vaccination plus booster every how many years? Every 10 years, huh? So when you get the history ba, okay? Okay, so this ends my koan. So the greatest triumph of medicine, especially in infectious disease, not only curing the disease, but preventing it. Okay, this ends my lecture for IDS. Are there any questions? Do you still have energy for the gastro? You'll be having your gastro, no?
Yes, Doc.
Okay. So, hala, naka-extend jug ko. Sorry kayo. Maybe you can eat your lunch while you listen na lang?
Yes, Doc.
Okay. Sige.
Thank you, Doc.
Okay, no questions, huh? Everybody
Wala
na po,
understand,
Doc.
ba? Okay, sige. Wait. Let me... Yala. Wait. What? Gastro. Oh no. What's happening? Ang kuan IDS gyapon no ang makita. What slides do you see?
Wala, Doc.
Wala, Doc.
Okay, wait ha. IDS gastro. Hala. I don't know how to do this. Wait, let me just go on, huh? IDS gastro. Oh no. Wala gyapon, no? What do you see?
Ang slide, Dok, pero
Gastro,
wala
Doc.
siya nakakuan, Dok. Wala siya
Upper
naka-play.
gastro na siya. Okay, sige. Why can't I? Di lagi siya mukuan. Oh no, I don't know how to do this. Wait mo, out sa ako ha. Akong kuanon. Wait. Okay. How's this? Okay na?
Yes, Doc.
Okay. Sige, pangaon na lang mo diha ha. Gutom na. Okay. So, this was the lecture that I'm sorry again. So our objectives is to discuss on the pathophysical diagnostics and management of the following diseases. No, just three lang: the PUD, IBS, and the IBD. Okay. So I'll start with the case. 45 years. The pain was described as burning. No, occurring 2 to 3 hours after meals and is relieved by food or antacids. No, he noted occasional melena but no hematemesis or weight loss. The patient had history of taking ibuprofen daily for chronic knee pain but with no history of alcohol abuse. So tenderness, no guarding, no organomegaly. Diagnostics showed slightly low hemoglobin, slightly anemic, with stool occult positive, urea breath test positive for H. pylori, and upper GI endoscopy showing the ulcer in the bulb. So obvious, no PUD. No? Okay, so let's proceed. Let's first discuss on the gas. So you were able to study on the anatomy na. Did you go through this already? Not yet? Not yet?
Not yet, Doc.
Anyways, so the just a review or a recap, no, the gastrotomy, and there are three the regions, the eye. Okay, the fundus, the body, the cardia. This is just a brief one, and of course the pylorus, no. Now your cardia comprises less than 5% of your gastric gland, and this is what can out and 70% of glands found within